thinking to Nietzsche. You remember that last time I was underscoring his voluntaristic view of human nature. The influence of people like Schopenhauer become pretty evident in his discussion of the strong-willed and the weak-willed, the Dionysian and the Apollonian, and his view that all of our values are ultimately traceable to this willed power that runs through everything, so that our non-egoistic values simply are revenge turned inwards against ourselves, and so forth. Then, as well, we're talking about his naturalism, because he finds a biological basis to all of this. A biological basis in the sense that while he thinks as an evolutionary naturalist, his evolutionary theory is not that of Darwinian natural selection. That is far too gradual a kind of process, and all it would produce is weak-willed conformists, adjusting to an environment, rather than overcome it. His biology is rather biological vitalism. That is to say that life is a creative force that pervades all of organic existence. Analogous in some ways, if you like, to what you read about Bergson in the chapter on Whitehead and Bergson, who sees in all of nature a static as well as a dynamic or creative aspect, tendency, which comes out in two different kinds of human thought, the analytic and the creative, intuitive. Don't write about two sides of the brain, that's not the kind of biology they're talking about. Biological vitalism, rather. Now, this biological vitalism is plainly, along with the voluntarism, going to affect whatever he says about human knowledge, human thought, epistemology. And in order to pick up on that in particular, which nowadays I suspect is the most influential part of Nietzsche, because it feeds into postmodernism, in order to pick up on that, would you turn in the anthology to page 323. 323. And you'll be bemused by the first paragraph, even though it's the second paragraph I'm after. The first paragraph will help you to get the continuity, indeed. Says he, after Buddha was dead, people showed his shadow for centuries afterwards in a cave, an immense, frightful shadow. God is dead, but as the human race is constituted, there will perhaps be caves for millenniums yet in which people will show his shadow, and we have still overcome his shadow. Now, this is his satirical way, you see, of saying, as he does in other contexts, God is dead, but you must become the meaning of the earth. You should be as God. You see. Well, 109, there on 323, says what this new superhuman needs to guard against, if this is going to be. Let us be on our guard against thinking that the world is a living being. Raises all sorts of questions and says that disgusts me. And then, 8 lines down, let's now be on our guard against believing that the universe is a machine. It's assuredly not constructed with a view to one end. We invest it with far too high an honour with the word machine. Let's be on our guard against supposing that anything so methodical as the cyclic motions of the neighbouring stars obtains generally and throughout the universe. And the bottom line, the general character of the world, on the other hand, is to all eternity chaos. Not by the absence of necessity, but in the sense of the absence of order, structure, form, beauty, wisdom, whatever else our aesthetic humanities are called. And then on 324, about halfway through that first paragraph, let's be on our guard against saying there are laws of nature. There are only necessities. There's no one who commands, obeys, transgresses. When you know there's no design, you know also there's no chance. For it's only where there is a world of design that the word chance has a meaning. Let's be on our guard against saying that death is contrary to life. A living being is only a species of a dead being, a very rare species. Yes, those of the weak-willed are just a living death. Let's be on our guard against thinking that the world eternally creates the new. There's no eternally enduring substances. Matter is just another error, as the god of the Eleatics. Now, look back over that, and you notice that what he is doing is, when I use the word advisedly, deconstructing every known theory about the universe. You see? Here are these attempts at rational explanation, none of which work. That seems to be his point. You see? So you might just as well say, let's be on our guard against thinking. Period. You see? And I take it that's his main point. Let's be on our guard against thinking. And if you turn later on to 340, no, take it back, let's see, what was the one I was after? That was what, 323? 333, I think it is, that I'm after. No, 326 first, I beg your pardon, 326. Section 111, on the origin of the logical. Where has logic originated in men's heads? Undoubtedly out of the illogical. Yes, this creative impulse that's unpredictable, irrational, so forth. The domain of which must originally have been immense. And towards the bottom of the page, no living being would have been preserved unless the contrary inclination to affirm rather than suspend judgment, to mistake rather than wait, to assent rather than deny, to side rather than be in the right, unless that had been cultivated with extraordinary assiduity. The course of logical thought and reasoning in our modern brain corresponds to a process and struggle of impulses, which singly and in themselves are all illogical and unjust. We usually experience only the result of the struggle. So rapidly and secretly does this primitive mechanism now operate in us. Now, you remember that in people like Hobbes and Spinoza, determinists, there was the notion that the process of reasoning is often just the alternation of alternative emotions, alternative impulses of some sort. Now here this is, you see, in Nietzsche, with the difference that instead of one being just weighing heavier than the other, and so the decision is made this way, here it's an arbitrary creative force which simply affirms one over against the other. And accordingly, the whole matter of rationality is ultimately an illogical process. No ground to it. And then on 333, the paragraph 4, the falseness of an opinion, is not for us an objection. Now, it's here, perhaps, that our new language sounds most strangely. The question is, how far an opinion is life-furthering, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps species-rearing? And we're fundamentally inclined to make the falsest opinions, to maintain that the falsest opinions are the most indispensable to us. That without a recognition of logical fictions, without comparison of realities of the purely imagined world, without a constant counterfeiting of the world, man couldn't live. The renunciation of false opinions would be a renunciation of life, a negation of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby placed itself beyond good and evil. So that the quest for truth is not an issue. That's not the point. He has a purely instrumental value to the theories and beliefs we come up with. We create them for our own purposes. An expression of the will to power. And so on the next page, 344, you get some of his rather typical satire addressed to some of your favourite people. So that half a dozen lines down on 344, he talks of the spectacle of the Tartuffery of old Kant, equally stiff and decent, with which he entices us into the dialectic byways that lead to his categorical imperative. Makes us fastidious ones smile, we who find no small amusement in spying out the subtle tricks of old moralists and ethical preachers. You see. Then he says, or still more so, the hocus pocus in mathematical form, by means of which Spinoza has, as it were, clad his philosophy in mail and mask. You know, how can you assault Spinoza with his rigid logic? And so he's taking this view of human knowledge, of truth claims, and applying it to those 18th century Enlightenment types, completely. And finally, on page 366, where he's talking of moral knowledge, you have this paragraph. My demand upon the philosopher is known that he take his stand beyond good and evil, that's the title of one of Nietzsche's books from which this is taken, beyond good and evil, and leave the illusion of moral judgment beneath himself. Moral judgment is illusory. This demand follows from an insight that I was the first to formulate. He's not afraid of egoism, you see. Any rejection of egoism would simply be an attack on himself. Keep that in mind. He's a thoroughgoing egoist. But the first to formulate this, there are altogether no moral facts. Moral judgments agree with religious ones in believing in realities that are no realities. Morality is merely an interpretation of certain phenomena, more precisely a misinterpretation. Moral judgments, like religious ones, belong to a stage of ignorance at which the very concept of the real and the distinction between what is real and imaginary are still lacking. Thus, truth, at this stage, designates all sorts of things which today we call imaginings. Moral judgments are therefore never to be taken literally. They always contain mere absurdity. Semiotically, they remain invaluable. Semiotically, that is to say, they are a sign of something. They reveal, at least for those who know, the most valuable realities of cultures and inwardnesses which did not know enough to understand themselves. So we think our values are objectively real in some way, but those who understand realize it's simply the wishful thinking language, mere symptomatology. One must know what it's all about to be able to profit from it. Okay, so no such thing as truth, no objective moral qualities, no basis in reality for moral knowledge, no basis for any kind of knowledge. Now, you see why I write on the board Nietzsche, parenthesis, and postmodernism? Because I suspect that in the radical postmodernism of our day, it's Nietzsche who's the most single influential force. That is to say, the postmodernism that has turned from more modest epistemologies, still want to make truth claims, but more modestly so. The radical postmodernism of today has turned from that, from talking about truth altogether, to essentially power politics. You see. And the politicization of the university, which you read about in the press these days, is simply in the Nietzschean will to power of certain interest groups. You see. Turning itself inside out in order to assert that sort of thing. So we create our own truth by virtue of the utility that we force upon those who oppose it. That's the station. Okay, does that make sense? You see where he's coming from? I should say where he's going to. Nietzsche. Okay. He says the same sort of thing in other places. Let's see. Yeah, here's one. Behind logic stand value judgments, or to speak more plainly, physiological demands for preserving a certain kind of life. You see, all your arguments prove is something about why you find it necessary to do that at all. And he speaks of positivism with its objective empirical data as a democratic self-glorification of the free intellect. Democratic because anybody can gain empirical data. You see. And skepticism as a vague physiological quality which in common language is called nervous weakness. A sickness that lacks decisiveness, lacks the will to truth. You see. If you don't have the will to power to assert something is true, you're weak-willed. Nervous weakness. That's sick. Well, if on the other hand you say to Nietzsche, well, is all this that you're telling us true? You see, I remember asking that in a graduate school course one time, to which the professor responded, Nietzsche would just have a good belly laugh at that. And in fact, I find in one of his books, he says, one repays a teacher badly if one remains nothing but a pupil. I bid you lose me and find yourselves, and only when you've denied me will I return to you. Get the point? The one thing Nietzsche wanted to insist is that nothing is true, not even what I'm telling you, not even that. Now, that obviously poses the old liar dilemma from antiquity, when a certain Cretan says, all Cretans are liars. Now, if a Cretan tells you all Cretans are liars, is he telling the truth? If he's telling the truth, he's telling falsehood. If all Cretans are liars, then he's a liar. But if he's telling you a falsehood, then he's not telling you the truth that all Cretans are liars. And it's not true that Cretans are liars. You see, you've got that dilemma. Well, similarly, Nietzsche, in a way, means beyond repudiating the quest for any kind of knowledge, truth. And he is particularly emphatic about that when it comes to ethics and religion. I think that's particularly clear. Okay. Well, I said that he deconstructs various theories about the universe because, of course, deconstructionism is postmodernism in literary interpretation. The interpretation of it. Okay. You want to comment at all about Nietzsche, Kierkegaard? Yeah. Jeff.
When you talk about he reject Darwinism because they would be adapting to their
Yes.
culture.
Yeah.
Okay, are you referring to actual living organism, or are you referring to social Darwinism? And if so, isn't it by their adaptation they overcome their...
Yeah, keep in mind that Nietzsche's underlying thesis, and don't ask me if he thinks it's true, he thinks it's useful at least, you'll see. His underlying thesis is about the will to power. And it's biologically rooted. This is his useful thesis. Now, in that case, what drives the evolutionary process is not the desire for some conformity. You see. It's not the desire for harmony and resolving all of the adjustment problems. What drives it is, if you like, red tooth, bloody claw, we shall overcome. You see, so not Darwinism, but rather this vitalistic, what in Bergson is called creative evolution, sudden outbursts of novelty that are unpredictable in terms of all the mechanisms. Okay. That biological vitalism was popular through the 19th century until about 1940, 1950. The gradual development of biochemistry and the recognition of all the Watson-Crick material and so forth about DNA and such like. That so outdated vitalism, you'll see, that we no longer viewed life as itself a creative force distinct from the material elements on which it works, but rather life as a function of certain highly complex biochemical compounds. So vitalism is not very popular now. Oh, the emotivism in his ethic. Yeah, I should have linked that up. That last thing, there are no moral facts. That is to say, there is no truth about right or wrong, virtue and vice. There are no objective moral facts at all that can be known. Well, what then are moral judgments? Expressions of emotion, of will to power, or weak-willedness, as the case may be. Yeah. What are we doing when we approve of something, or disapprove of something? You see, we're asserting emotion about that. So you get this emotivist interpretation of ethic, which is paralleled, of course, in positivism, as we'll be finding out in the Anglo-American tradition. It's not simply a subjectivist ethic. Ethical subjectivism is the view that when I say something is right and wrong, I'm talking about my subjective attitudes. No, for Nietzsche, you're not talking about your attitudes, you're just venting them, putting them to work. That's something different. Okay. Yeah. Rorty, no. Yeah, Rorty draws on a number of sources, of whom Nietzsche is one. Dewey is another. Wittgenstein is another. So there's a whole potpourri of things. Does Rorty see Nietzsche as making truth claims? I don't think so, but I want to go back and check Rorty on that. Okay, now I suppose that an inverted Platonism would be to the effect that theory is down here, or better still, ideology is down here. Would that be it? And factual assertion